talking about For today, we will be talking about the differences between the Philippines and India, and how these two countries' different culture affect their workplace environment. Today, we have two professors who will explain to us their differences using Hofstede 6D model. To give us a brief and simple explanation of Hofstede 6D model, let us welcome our first guest, Ms. Darlene Masilang.
Thank you for the warm welcome and thank you for inviting on your show. So, to give a brief explanation of Hofstede's 6D model, Professor Gert Hofstede conducted one of the most comprehensive studies of how values in the workplace are influenced by culture. He defines culture as the collective programming of the mind distinguishing the members of one group or category of people from others. The 6 dimensions of national culture are based on extensive research done by Professor Gert Hofstede, Gert-Jan Hofstede, Michael Minkov, and their research team. The application of this research is actually used worldwide in both academic and professional management settings.
Let us tackle how the 6D model a little deeper, and how this help our professors to differentiate India and Philippines.
Let's start now. If we explore the Philippine and Indian culture through the lens of 6D model, we can get a good overview of the deep drivers of the Philippine culture relative to India and vice versa.
Basically, Hofstede's 6D model of national culture consists of 6 dimensions. The cultural dimensions represent independent preferences for one state of affairs over another that distinguish countries rather than individuals from each other. The country's scores on the dimensions are relative in that we are all human and simultaneously we are all unique. In other words, culture can only be used meaningfully by comparison. The model consists of the following dimensions, which we'll elaborate more as we go by our discussion. First, we have power index or PDI. Second is individualism versus collectivism, IDV. Third is masculinity versus femininity or MAS. Fourth is uncertainty avoidance index or UIA. Fifth is long-term orientation versus short-term normative orientation or LTO. And sixth is indulgence versus restraint or IVR.
Ms. Darlene and Ms. Maddie, can you please explain more specifically each of the 6 dimensions so our listener can understand it more?
Of course, Miss Madeline and I will explain it one by one to give our listeners more understanding of the topic at hand. And for our listeners to understand it more, we will compare India and Philippines culture for the following dimensions. Here we have a chart representation of both the scores of India and Philippines for references and better understanding. Now, first we have the power distance index or PDI. These dimensions express the degree to which the less powerful member of a society accept and expect the power is distributed unequally. The fundamental issue here is how a society handles inequalities among people. At a score of 94, the Philippines is a hierarchical society. This means that people accept a hierarchical order in which everybody has a place and which needs to further justification. Hierarchy in organization is seen as reflecting inherent inequalities. Centralization is popular. Subordinates expect to be told what to do, and the ideal boss in a benevolent autocrat. The high power distance index implies the idea that those in inferior position, such as the coconut farmers, are willing to accept and expect social inequality. For example, even though pricing is an issue, most coconut farmers are likely just accept the situation because they don't hold any higher position to complain or voice their disagreement for the situation. Another example is that as the elders might believe that they are knowledgeable and having nothing to learn or improve, young people might not bring ideas forward. Under these conditions, innovations might not be welcomed owing to the fear of being too progressive. While in India scores high on this dimension, 77, indicating an appreciation for hierarchy and a top-down structure in society and organizations. If one were encapsulate the Indian attitude, one could use the following words and phrases dependent on the boss or the power holder for direction, acceptance of unequal rights between the power privileged and those who are lesser down in the pecking order, immediate superiors accessible but one layer above less so, paternalistic leader, management directs, give reason, meaning to one's work life and rewards in exchange for loyalty from employees.
What do you think about Philippines has higher power distance than India?
You know, there is one thing that I found unique about Indians is that they are highly receptive to soft power, be it the charisma of leadership, opinions of experts, or the inherent respect for authority figures. Hence, meeting obligations and being responsive to the expectations of trusted others or those in power uniquely motivate them. One research suggests that Indians tend to be oriented more towards meeting obligations relative to enhancing individual autonomy, unlike in the Philippines where citizens are protesting against the lockdown by framing it as the suppression of individual freedom. Indians, although obviously concerned with daily bread and butter issues, are not majorly framing it in that manner. An important point to note is that because people are obligations oriented or inherently trusting of authority figures, that responsibility of the powers that be multiplies manifold or input more pressure on authorities to do better.
Now, for our second dimension is individualism versus collectivism, or simply called IDV. The fundamental issue addressed by this dimension is the degree of interdependence a society maintains among its members. It has to do with whether people's self-image is defined in terms of I or we. In individualist societies, people are supposed to look after themselves and then direct family only. In collectivist societies, people belong to in-groups that care of them in exchange for loyalties. For the Philippines, with a score of 32, is considered a collectivistic society. This is manifest in a close long-term commitment to the member group, be that a family, an extended family, or even extended relationships. Loyalty in the collectivist culture is paramount and overrides most other societal rules and regulations. The society fosters strong relationships where everyone takes responsibility for fellow members of their group. In collectivist society, offense leads to shame and loss of face. Employers or employee relationship are sometimes perceived in moral terms like a family link, and hiring and promotion decisions take account of the employees in group. Management is the management of groups. Unlike Westerners who value individualism, Filipinos are usually collectivists. Identify with their families, regional affiliation, and peer groups. Filipino self-concept and identities are strongly tied to their families. From birth to death, they see themselves in the context of their families. For many, everything they do or fail to do will ultimately affect their family's reputation. This is because from childhood they had been admonished to accomplish and be the pride of the family. They are told that to do otherwise would ultimately shame the family's name. Although this may no longer be true to modern city-based individuals, many Filipinos in the Philippines and abroad are still family-centric. An example of this is that important decisions and problems are only discussed within the immediate family, not among all other relatives. Filipinos may be generous and hospitable to their extended family, but it is the welfare and wishes of the immediate family that drives them to work, sacrifice, and achieve. After the parents, the older brother or kuya and the elder sister or ate are responsible for their younger siblings. The youngest daughter usually takes care of her aging parents. If the youngest daughter is married, the elderly mother or father stays with her family. Now in India, with a rather intermediate score of 48, is a society with both collectivistic and individualistic traits. The collectivistic side means that there is a high preference for belonging to a larger social framework in which individuals are expected to act in accordance to the greater good of one's defined in groups. In such situations, the actions of the individual are influenced by various concepts such as the opinion of one's family, extended family, neighbors, work group, and other wider social networks that one has some affiliation towards. For a collectivistic side to be rejected by one's fears or to be thought lowly by one's extended and intermediate group leaves him or her rudderless and with a sense of intense emptiness. The employer or employee relationship is one of expectations based on expectations, loyalty by the employee, and almost familial protection by the employer. Hiring and promotion decisions are often made based on relationships, which are the key to everything in a collectivistic society. The only individualistic aspect of Indian society is seen as a result of its dominant religion or philosophy, which is Hinduism. The Hindus believe in a cycle of death and rebirth, with the manner of each rebirth being dependent upon how the individual lived the preceding life. People are, therefore, individually responsible for the way they lead their lives and the impact it will have upon their rebirth. This focus on individualism interacts with the otherwise collectivist society tendencies of the Indian society, which leads to its intermediate score on this dimension.
Based on Hofstede, India and Philippines has a low percentage of individualism. Or do you think these two countries are more on collectivism? Why?
Now, both Indians and Filipinos are more on the collectivism side because both Indians and Filipinos' decision-making is either influenced by their family, be it immediate or extended, their friends, the society, or even the government. But the Indians have one individualistic trait. This is their spiritual belief, especially for Hindus. They believe in the words, you can change and improve yourself. You do not try to change the world and you follow your own path. With regards to the others, of course, individually rather than collectively. This is also complements and arises out of the belief in karma, in which the individual alone is responsible for her or his karma, the effects of which are incurred over several lives.
Wow! Even if you only discuss the first